Welcome to Little Things First. This is Jim Martin, and this is a special episode that we're doing because there's a lot going on in our country right now, Tracy, right?
Yeah, exactly. So this is Tracy Van Deventer, and we are surprised by the response and thrilled by all the people that have been moved into action. And I'm excited to talk more about Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, you had an experience today. Tell a little bit about it.
Well, yeah, I went actually to a rally today. And here's the question too: what do you call it? A rally, a march, a protest? I don't know. We can talk about that once John's here. But we went to what I'm going to call a rally, and a lot of people were there, and it was actually really emotional for me, and powerful and inspiring to see such diversity and so many different kinds of people out. And yeah, I'll tell you more as we get going, but
That's cool.
it was moving, and I've got my shirt. Yeah.
Yes, you do. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Okay. All right. Should we bring John in?
Yeah, let's bring him in.
Okay. John.
Oh, there's John's house. Hey, John.
There's John.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi,
Good.
John.
How are you doing?
So good. Long time no see.
It
That's
is
right.
so good to see you.
Oh, so good to see both of you.
You were back in one of our very first episodes.
That's right. That's right. You guys were there back at the very beginning of my teaching career. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, hey, with some congratulations are in order because you are the Salt Lake City School District Teacher of the Year, right?
This is correct. I don't know how that happened, but yes, absolutely.
Well, it's long overdue, but congratulations.
Yes,
That's
yes.
wonderful.
Oh, thank
Well
you so much.
deserved. Well deserved.
Thank you. I was very proud to bring it back to Meadowlark Elementary in Salt Lake City. So
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
what happens? Do you like compete at the state level or?
Yeah, so I it's weird to say compete, you know,
Yeah,
like
it's a bad
winning
word.
well, it's one of those things where, you know, being selected teacher of the year is kind of like being selected like rainbow of the year or unicorn of the year. Like we're all like all teachers are natural wonders, you know. It's like
Right.
they're all beautiful, but yeah, I get to represent for my school district at the state level, and yeah, I've got an application due at the end of the month, and then see what happens.
Sweet.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
Well, we're proud of you. That's really wonderful.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Good.
Well, thanks for meeting with us again because we just, we record several months in advance, but we thought we should really have a conversation with some folks about what's going on in the country right now. And so this is going to come out sooner rather than later
Okay.
because we want some perspectives from teachers about
Yeah.
Black Lives Matter and, just another murder of a African-American male this week. I mean, it just keeps going on and on. So we're just wondering, what are your reactions to all of this as a social justice minded educator?
It's I mean, to try and put labels on the emotions I'm feeling is pretty tough. It's disgusting. It's disheartening. Um, I'm filled with a great sense of hope watching the protests, watching, I've been in this teaching for 7 years now. So my first group was in 5th grade, and they are now finishing their junior year of high school. And I've watched them lead marches. I've gotten to watch them give speeches and take control of this issue on behalf of themselves and their community. And so, when you see that, it leaves you feeling both pained that they have to, but heartened by the way that they take a stand. It's a beautiful thing, but in a terrible time.
Right.
Yeah. How are you all feeling?
Overwhelmed.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel this sense that I want to do something and, I don't know exactly what to do, but something is better than nothing. So talking about it, reading, I think everybody is trying to find a way to to understand and to be part of the conversation and to move things
Right.
forward. And I think educators are in a great position because we're, I mean, we have the potential to be activists, and we're in front of
Hmm.
kids all the time, and
Yeah.
have a great ability to influence. What do you think your role will be when kids come back in the fall, if they do come back, I guess?
Well, yeah, whether we're in person or online, the responsibility is the same, right? We have to,
Hmm.
um, you know, inform them. Uh, a lot of them, unfortunately, are very brutally being forced to reckon with the realities of race in our nation. And some of my students, several of my students, I remember having this conversation a few years ago. Because unfortunately, this is nothing new. The action that people are taking now is amazing, but these heinous killings and the murdering of uh, Black men and women in our society, unfortunately, has been something to talk to students about for my whole time in teaching. And when I would have these conversations with some students who were fresh from Africa, refugees, having to reckon with what it means to be Black in America and have this Asian teacher telling you about this reality that you need to be aware of because you face threats that you didn't realize were there when you came to the country. Uh, I I always feel you know guilty that I have to break this kind of bad news to them, ill-equipped, not being a member of the marginalized community affected most directly by this. But my role is going to be to make sure that my students are informed, and then um, push them to do something about it. My students have always understood the fact that it's fine for a time to be sad and to watch what's happening, but very soon after that, you have to get up and you got to do something about it. And my students, I teach sixth grade. Um, they are 11 and 12 years old, but more than capable of joining the conversation, um, taking action on behalf of themselves, their families, their community. At my school, it's primarily it's majority Latino, and um, the demographics from their breakdown with Pacific Islander, Asian, a lot of refugee students, and unfortunately, every single group that might get listed on the spreadsheet, they all have something that they're fighting against and people that they're fighting for. So whether right now it's Black Lives Matter, and making sure that they all understand both their roles as members of their own community groups, but allies for each other to stand up with and lean on when the time comes. They get it, and whether I'm telling them over WebEx or Zoom or in person, they're gonna get it in the fall too.
John, one thing I love about your work is that you do probably the best job of anybody I've seen on giving students a voice. And I've seen you do that through the videos that you've made. And I know that we've talked about earlier when we had you as a guest, but I would love to relist those and just remind people, because I think right now those messages that students give in those videos are even more meaningful. But I'd love to hear from you about what is your process of getting to the place with your students where you're talking about those kind of difficult things and then feeling comfortable and creating a space that's comfortable that allows students to be taped and to be part of this, because you can tell when you watch the videos, kids are kids are saying things that mean something, right? So
Absolutely.
would you talk about that process a little? Because I think, like Jim, we're all looking for ways to
Yeah,
have action, and if nothing else, this could be a really powerful way for us to have kids get a voice.
sure. So, I was listening to one of your past episodes where the gentleman was talking about creating an ecosystem for having conversations around race, and the same can be applied to any critical and sensitive topic. It starts with building a classroom environment and community where everybody knows that you are taken care of, that you're safe. This is a I have a little light up star in my classroom that has the word drama with all those like no smoking circles
Yeah.
with the slash through it. Like there's no drama here. That doesn't mean that we don't deal with tough stuff, but there's none of the just wasted time taken for petty things, because at 11 and 12 years old, I put a lot of pressure on my students, and their parents put a lot of pressure on them to step up. You know, they have to take care of the siblings at home. They have a ton of responsibility. I have several students who go to work with their parents, and they understand the fact that they are old enough. They were born old enough to take a stand, but they are expected to not only, like I said before, stand up for themselves, but stand up for each other. And kids take that to heart better than adults do, you know? And, you know, it takes time to establish an ecosystem where kids can have those conversations. And then once that's established, we get to work. And the kids, they understand the fact that I am there to facilitate their content. You know, they are content creators, and my job is to provide them with whatever information and resources they need. They pick their subjects, and you know, when we first talked, it was mostly around this whole group class project that I do, and I'll describe that, but it's expanded beyond that to more independent and small group activities too. But each year my students select a topic, whole group, that they all are passionately concerned about. We watch the news every morning. We watch CNN 10 while I check homework, and they eat breakfast in the classroom. And then as soon as breakfast is over and the 10 minutes of the current events are rounded up on CNN, we talk about it. And every day starts off with a discussion about what's happening in the news, what they think about it, what they think ought to be done. And there's usually just a very clear issue that gets repeated on the news over and over, and my students will say, "Oh, here we go," you know, and they just get so fired up and animated. And we talk about it, and then we decide, you know what, we're gonna enter the conversation, and not just in some, you know, drive-by way of entering a comment section of a video or whatever else and just posting something and then being gone. We're gonna take time to write a poem, a spoken word poem that's more free verse that we can then record together, and then video or create a video out of that audio recording that is representative of our classroom community. And we post those videos on YouTube. The first time we did it, we were inspired and motivated, not inspired by, but we were moved to take action by President Donald Trump's statement when he first announced that he was going to run, that, you know, Mexico was sending murderers and rapists to the United States of America. And my students took that personally and created a video where they talked about the fact that you know, the people who come here are the best that you're going to find anywhere in the world, because they've survived hardship and struggle, and they have a great deal to contribute. And it's gone on from there. Last year, my students, they saw the families and children being fenced in under the bridge in El Paso. And that one was tough because they saw it on Monday when we got back from spring break, babies and children lying in the dirt and tinfoil blankets. And they said, we got to make a song about this. And I said, okay. And they're like, but we got to do it fast because we watch the news, it'll be like out of the conversation really quickly. So we made that one in about a week, set to the tune of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And they just talked about how horrified they were by that sight. And then they presented an example, a model of how these families and children ought to be greeted when they reach the border. The last third of the video is them saying, welcome to the land of the free, and telling these people all of the rights that they're going to have. And no, I can't promise you'll stay, but while you're here, you'll be okay. And just just put it out there so that people could see, as these numbers grow at our border, here's how we ought to be taking care of them, and here's how we ought to be treating them. And I know it comes at cost to our country, but it's so worth it to be decent and good. And that's what I love most about the perspective that these kids put forward. They're just motivated by decency and inherently good. And we as adults are too. We just have other things that compromise our integrity, and they don't have that. They're gloriously just who they are. And now with these issues that we're facing, I've watched my former students respond passionately, thoughtfully, respectfully, but not without fire and in their hearts and in their words. And yeah, it's a project that I've done repeatedly. But when you do a whole group project like that, sometimes you have students who aren't necessarily represented, you know. Most of the videos we've done have been centered around immigration, because that was the main social justice issue that we were seeing a lot in the news. But I partnered with the Utah Film Center and joined up with a program that they have where they come out and they teach your students how to make short documentary films. And so my students for the last couple of years have chosen topics themselves. They can do it independently or they can do it in small groups. And so I had students making, you know, documentaries about immigrant art and what it's like to be the daughters, or to grow up as daughters without fathers, whatever issue it is that they are most directly affected by in their lives, and that when they go home is most apparent at the dinner table. And when you look around the room, it's freed up a lot of kids who were, you know, too quiet and too timid to find a voice for the issues that they were seeing. And right now, especially, we're seeing just how dangerous it can be if the timid don't speak and don't show up. You know, this is a time where everybody has to be there for each other and for the causes that matter. And hopefully by learning how to do that at 11 and 12, my kids will just get out there and grow in their voices and keep showing up.
That's great.
Yeah.
So John, you know, I mean, this has been going on for a really long time. Like, I was in high school in 1992 when the Rodney King assault led to, you know, LA riots. And so it's been going on for years. The Black community has been dealing with this for years. And people are saying this time it's going to be different. Do you think it will be different as a society? But I mean, we focus on education. I mean, how is this going to impact education? Is it going to impact it to a greater degree than past events have? And how?
I certainly hope so. I don't want to put it on the record that I predict that this is going to be that moment, and just to have that, you know, shown as my naivete or my idealism just run rampant, because, you know, it's like you said, this has been going on forever, and there have been plenty of moments, you know, death of Martin Luther King Jr. and the riots that we saw in the 60s, and that moment in the 90s, those riots in LA. And I hope so. But I think that the conversations around institutional racism and the way that systems are contributing negatively to the outcomes for different populations, I hope that educators and, you know, everybody up from administrators, superintendents, everybody's paying attention to the fact that, you know, you can't just say that racism is awful and that the killing of these people is deplorable when you are members and just integral parts of a system that is itself racist. The educational system in the United States is not without its blame, and if anything, could be called the root cause of a lot of what we're seeing. You know, when I look at my students, who are the vast majority are students of color, and I worry about, you know, the effect that this closure is going to have on the different gaps that were already there in society. You know, the achievement gap is only going to grow larger. The school to prison pipeline is only going to fill faster and run deeper in our communities. Nothing that was bad before is going to be better now. It's all going to get a little bit worse, but hopefully we're aware enough of that problem that we, as the cogs in the system, the parts that make it all move, insist that it's not enough to say that racism is bad, but to start implementing anti-racist practices in our classrooms, anti-racist practices in how we deal with behavioral issues and how we help kids who are struggling to be successful in our schools, not to punish, but to empathize and support. Our students of color have always been disproportionately affected adversely by the way that our system runs. And if we can move to a better place within our field, you know, and I do everything I can to improve my practice, to work on my game so I'm a better teacher for my students. If everybody approaches their craft and their work with a similar mindset, but recognizing also that this is life and death for our kids. They don't have to grow up to get shot or to be victimized by excessive police force. You know, I had a student who I went to my principal my second year of teaching, and he'd been struggling. He'd been a behavioral issue, but nothing crazy, and he was still coming to school. And something had happened in the neighborhood, and it was kind of making it hard for kids to learn in my class. So I went to my administrator to talk about it, and she's a wonderful leader. But I left her office, and she said that she was going to contact the student resource officer, or the school resource officer, the police officer that was assigned to our school. And when I came back to check 45 minutes later, after I taught a math lesson and got my kids into a good place where I could be freed up to come back, my student had already been taken off to juvenile detention. And this was on a Friday, and he was not released until Tuesday. And that young man was, and still is, brilliant. He's one of my favorite people in the whole wide world. And I've tried to keep tabs on him and keep touch, but his educational experience never recovered. You know, he was a fifth grader then. He was never able to come back, and he for a time resented me. And that was a moment where I realized that I had failed as a teacher, as an ally, as just a human being. And I hadn't meant to. I just didn't realize the consequences of my choice, you know, who I went to and what I said and what I talked about with them. And frankly, I have not taken a student to the administration in that way since. And I just finished my 7th year teaching. So that's 5 years where I've never asked for any help with a behavioral issue. One, because I'd like to think that I have the relationships to deal with those kinds of problems. But two, I also know that there's a chance that my kid might get locked up for something that he shouldn't. And I'm never willing to take that chance. And until that fear is taken away, until I know that I can take a student who's having a hard time and they're going to get support and not punishment, then, you know, we're going to end up seeing biases that carry on into all the generations to come, you know, until people work this thing out. But there's a lot of teachers out there marching. There's a lot of administrators out there marching. I know that you guys, Tracy, you were there today, weren't you?
Yep, I was.
Thank you. You know, that's by making that visible and other teachers seeing and other administrators seeing that this is the work that's being done. And, you know, I love the fact that students used to think it was weird when they bump elbows with us at the grocery store. And now they're bumping elbows with us at protests and marches.
Right.
That's, to me, that is a sign that we are moving toward a better world. That's what gives me hope and makes me think maybe this is that moment, you know? And at the very least, it will be better than it was. And at least our kids will hopefully recognize that they are the ones that need to take action. I tell you, for me, the moment that changed was the Parkland shooting and the March for Our Lives movement that sprung out of it, watching young advocates and activists recognize the fact that adults had let them down and had failed to act, and so they refused to leave it to the quote unquote adults in the room. They say, you know what, we're going to do this. This is wrong. We've seen our friends die. No more. And my students a couple years ago, they made a video that they chose to entitle. The title they chose for the poem was "No More Waiting." You know, and the main idea in that poem is that, you know, we cannot wait for other people to fix our problems. We have to get out there and fix them ourselves. And I tell my kids all the time, like, I can't identify with the problems that you're dealing with. You know, I'm not Latinx. I don't have parents who are at risk of deportation. I'm not Black. I'm not at risk of being shot when I'm pulled over. I'm in a privileged position. It's also about teaching. You know, I try to be as culturally responsive in my classroom as I can. And as a representative of the Asian community, it's incumbent upon me to make sure that kids understand that, you know, this is a really tough time for Asians in America, you know, for people who are afraid of the xenophobia that's coming from being, you know, blamed for the Chinese virus, the coronavirus. And also, you know, Asians, you know, Asian Americans, we tend to be a little bit more soft-spoken and we don't raise our hands as much to talk about things. But, you know, riots and looting, things that you see on the news, it's incredibly triggering for us. You know, anytime I listen to elders in my community talk about the riots in the 90s there in Koreatown in LA, they talk about how they were standing on the roof buildings above their stores with shotguns, just trying to keep their life savings and their businesses that they'd given everything to from being burned to the ground. And so, you know, at the same time that we rise in support of, you know, the Black community, it does also quicken our heart rates when we see things on the news that you know, remind us of one of the worst chapters in our history, and that we then have to overcome and say, you know what, it's all right, we have to do this anyways, you know, and things will be better as a result. And when one of us rises, we all rise. So, you know, there you go.
Beautiful.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And I recorded after the march today. Jim asked me, you know, just to record some reflections, and we'll probably just tag it on to the end of this call, but I was surprised how emotional I became. And as you were talking about, you know, triggers with Parkland, for me, it was just recently, because before all of this Black Lives Matter, I was already preparing some equity work with the staff for the fall. And I came across this video that I had seen a long time ago, but it's a picture. It starts off, I think, in the 60s or 70s, but there's a, you know, a table, and there's little 4 and 5-year-olds, right? There's a table and it has a white baby and a Black baby, and they're exactly the same, right? Same baby, just different skin. And they asked the kids, who are so tiny, they might be in kindergarten. Maybe some are a little bit older, because there's a series of kids that come through on the video, the most recent video I watched, because it went through time.
Right.
But just overwhelmed with the idea that when the adult in the room says to the kid, which one of these babies is the nice baby?
Mhm.
It's the white baby. Which of these babies is the smart baby? The white baby. Which of these babies is the mean baby, or the scary baby, or the stupid baby, or the whatever negative terms were coming out, ugly baby? I mean, it was always the black baby. And it was consistent. It was consistent for white kids and black kids and Hispanic kids and
Yeah.
in kids from even in other countries, Spanish speaking kids. I mean, it was shocking for me to see that again. And interestingly, that I had kind of gone down that road before this evolved and erupted, and
Yeah.
wondering about how do we as educators make it so that we can help kind of embed in our brains that the black baby is not the ugly baby, the stupid baby, the mean baby, the right. And what are
Mhm.
the little things that we can do in our classrooms that sort of empower, right? That idea that these babies are both beautiful. But it's such a big leap, it seems. I
It
don't know.
is. Yeah, and it's one of those things where, I know the podcast is all about little things in education, but for something this big, little things will only chip away, like this is one of those things where, like you said, this starts so young with our kids. And as a system, like I said, it's not enough to passively teach about racism anymore. We have to be actively anti-racist.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
has to start in early childhood, pre-K, all the way up, so that whatever messaging it is that these kids are receiving that tells them that dark skin is bad, light skin is good,
Right.
that we don't just as educators put up our hands and say, well, that is a perspective. Here's an alternative perspective, whatever. It's like, no, some things are just wrong. And frankly, for me, immediately an alarm bell goes in my mind, like, wait, no, 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 no. It is not the place of school to indoctrinate kids, or it's not your place as an individual to push your personal beliefs onto these kids. But I have to ignore that alarm bell because that alarm has also been planted in my mind
Yes.
by those in power to keep us quiet and from actually making the change in conversation and attitude and in action that will actually make things better for our children, to free them from this cycle that we have all been stuck in. We have to, as a system, acknowledge the fact that racism is bad and that we as educators are warriors in this, and we have to be strong and together in fighting this thing, because if we don't, our students will be hurt. And at the core, every single teacher is devastated by things that hurt their kids. We love them, they are our family, they are our people. And so it's not just enough to say to the kids like, hey man, you need to be aware of what's happening in the world. It is, hey man, I'm not a member of your community, but I support you. You got to get out there and you got to fight because it's wrong. And anytime I have the opportunity to show up and fight behind you and clear space for you so that you can be heard in your fight, I'm going to do that. I'm not just going to teach you the history, I'm going to teach you how to make history, right? Our champions are there now. They need preparation, they need our help in crafting their messages, and then they need us to provide them with platforms like podcasts or YouTube videos or whatever the media may be, so that they can get their voice out there. And then once they learn how to do it, they take off. And so instead of them learning how to do it in their 20s, if they can learn it when they are 12, that's an additional decade of impact that they can have.
Yeah.
And that compounded will hopefully take us to where it is we all want to be, so that you're not marching on a Sunday afternoon. So you just enjoying the new world in which we all get to live, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think I think you're so right that notion of neutrality that we've sort of embraced in education. I mean, that's privilege. That's white privilege,
That
right there.
is,
You know, some of
yeah,
us get to act neutral and to pretend like race doesn't matter, and yet it's impacting our kids and their families every single day in lots of different ways. And so, you know, we can't be neutral anymore.
nope,
No.
yeah,
And the work is there for us to look at every day what we do with our students to make sure that also there are images of powerful people from many different
hmm,
places, right? And many different races. And making sure that that image and those examples are there and not just rely on the convenience of whoever wrote the history books. Because
hmm,
we know that most of history is written by those who have power and those who've won the war. So
hmm.
we've got to take time to make sure that we have all voices heard.
Absolutely. And inside of all of us, that word power that you keep coming back to, you know, our job as teachers is to teach kids how to access their power, you know. First recognize that
Yeah.
we are all powerful. You are powerful. And the fact of the matter is that most of the pent up frustration and everything that we're seeing on the news right now, it is rooted in the fact that long ago people recognized the power of your ancestors, and the only way that they could control it was by convincing these people, and not just convincing, by forcing them and beating them and murdering them into a position where they lost sight of their power, and then also were too afraid to exercise it. And
Yeah.
now it is incumbent upon all of us to activate that power inside of our children so that they can go out there and defend themselves and defend their communities. And then, you know, I it's one of those things where my daughters, I have two little girls and they're 4 and 2, and they're getting ready to enter this educational system. And uh, you know, my wife is a feminist, I'm a feminist. We believe in the power of our daughters. And Jim, you talk about privilege. My daughters are a quarter Korean, you know, they're blonde hair, blue-eyed little cuties. And you know, I think one of my greatest fears as a father is that they will rest too easily on their privilege, you know. And I also feel that little bit of uh, I'm a little unsure of when it is that I should get intense with them about you know, the fact that they are privileged and that they have a responsibility because of that privilege. uh, I'm thinking 4 is pretty darn close to right. But
Here it
but I
comes.
look at the 2-year-old. I'm like, I don't know.
There's a
Can she?
new baby board book that just came out, Anti-Racist Baby. So
I saw that. I'm
yeah,
excited.
yeah.
Yes,
I haven't seen it
yes,
yet, but I've heard some great things. So
yeah. I'd buy it just for the title. And I
Yes.
saw the picture too. It's beautiful. Yeah.
yeah, very cool. John, thank you so much for talking to us, because we're just trying to, like everybody else, make sense of all this, and you know, just having another person chat it out with us and help
Yeah.
us figure things out and sort through some
Perspective. And
feelings and emotions.
And John, whatever videos that you feel that you can share with us too, we just want your student voices to continue to be out there. If there's permission for us to be able to share them,
There
because
definitely
they
is.
are powerful. They are very powerful.
Yeah. If anybody listening wants to check out the work that my students put out there, our YouTube channel is Ninth Evermore, the number 9 with TH, and then Evermore
Ninth
after that.
Evermore.
And you can check out, they've got videos on standing up for their communities, and they've also got like a quoting or citing sources in a text Harlem Shake video, and math, all kinds of stuff. But
So
Nice.
nice.
yeah,
Yeah,
they do
we'll
good
link to
work.
it. We'll link to it from our webpage.
Yeah, definitely.
Perfect. You guys aren't going to ask me the question about like what I would tell my younger self? Like
Has it
everybody gets
changed?
that question.
We'd love to hear if it's shifted. Has it changed at all, John? Are you going to give yourself different advice?
I've got all kinds of advice for my younger self.
Okay,
I'd
tell
say,
us.
invest in this thing called Zoom. It's going to
Early
be
on.
big. You can still stay in the classroom, but you won't have to worry about stuff as much. I would tell my younger self to move twice as fast and say half as much. And then I'd also recommend that he go ahead and high five and hug any kid passing by in the hallway, especially the ones having a hard time, because in a matter of years there'll be a moratorium on high fives and hugs. And so get them in now, first year teacher John, because they feed the soul, and they're going to be few and far between within the decade.
So true.
I have a
So
feeling,
them
though,
in
that
there.
you'll find some other ways to connect with your
Yeah.
students, because that is your
Yeah.
strength. So
I don't know if elbow bumps will ever do the job, but it's gonna look like I'm a UFC fighter in my school. Just going after kids.
just a lot of sanitizer, a lot of hand sanitizer.
A lot of hand sanitizer, but I tell you what, man, for this beautiful moment in history, it's awful, it's terrible, it's horrible, but the marches and the protests and everything is so beautiful. And to be on summer break when it's happening and not to have the chance to process with kids is the most painful thing, I think, in the whole wide world. It's, and again, that just speaks to my privilege.
Yeah.
That's, I'm privileged in all things, but more than anything else, I am privileged to be a teacher.
Yeah. It's a great thing to be in education.
It's the best job in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good.
well, thank you for taking time on your Sunday to chat with us.
Yep.
And
And thanks for
No, thank you
rescheduling
both.
so I
Hey,
could go
yeah.
rally.
No, you're awesome. And if you don't mind, I just got for anybody who's listening, and if you've been listening to the podcast like me, you guys have some cool people on,
Yeah.
authors and article, all this kind of stuff. But Tracy was the first principal I ever got to work with when I was a pre-service teacher. She and her amazing teachers hosted me at their elementary, and then Jim, I got the pleasure of getting to know when we were doing turnaround work in my second year of teaching. You guys, not for nothing, I mean, you guys kind of raised me as a teacher, and you get all these experts on here, but thanks for bringing on little old John again.
Well, you're probably coming back, so just prepare, okay?
That's right.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Excellent. All
Thank
right.
you so
Thank
much.
you.
Well, thank
Give
you
your
guys
family
so
a hug
much.
for us.
You know it.
All
I'll
right.
get back to you. All right.
See
See
ya.
ya.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.